Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 101. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another discussion, another journey into talking about a new movie that we got to check out in theaters or streaming. We'll dive into some pros and cons, my favorite performance, my favorite moments, and then I'll go ahead and recommend whether you guys should check this one out in theaters or streaming. And more importantly, the last segment of this podcast is to talk about, is this movie timeless? Would I consider it a movie to rewatch in the future over and over again and add it to my movie collection? Before diving into episode 101, though, I did want to let you know episode 100 is out on all platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Go check it out. You'll hear me and my brother Omar talk about Christmas classic movies, timeless movies that we watch every time December comes around. I ended up choosing How the Grinch Stole Christmas. My brother ended up choosing Home Alone, two of the all-time greats. Give it a listen. Let me know what you thought about that episode, as well as what is your favorite Christmas movie that you consider timeless as well. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive in to episode 101, in which we are talking about The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. This film is directed by Kenji Kamiyama, and it is about the story of these certain characters 200 years or around there before the actual story of Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. I saw a trailer about this, and I had heard things and rumors about a new Lord of the Rings adaptation coming to the big screen. And so I was really excited. I consider all three movies of The Lord of the Rings timeless for me. Those are films that I would love to rewatch every other year typically, and it's just so much fun to watch. It's such a great kind of story as you're just following these awesome characters, the fellowship, and everything that takes place in Middle Earth. And so I'm already a big fan, and I really wanted to check out this War of the Rohirrim. What kind of a story would it tell? And just by watching the first trailer, I was super hooked. I really enjoyed the animation, the style that they kind of set up. And again, it wasn't anything about what was taking place in The Lord of the Rings. It's 200 years before that. And so just it got my attention, and I really wanted to kind of give it a shot and see how it would, engage me and how much I would enjoy watching the movie. So I ended up checking it out with my brother in theaters. So let's go ahead and transition over to my overall non-spoiler thoughts of The War of the Rohirrim. So after checking out Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, I gotta say that I really enjoyed my time watching this movie. It was awesome to be back in the world of the Lord of the Rings. Like I mentioned, those films are timeless for me. Watched them various times. Actually, funny enough, this year we actually just watched the extended cuts of all three movies, so it was fun to kind of get a little bit more details of certain characters. But watching War of the Rohirrim, it was cool to be back in that kind of an environment where you're listening to hints of the music of the writers of Rohan. You're seeing these kind of characters interact with each other. You're seeing locations that you've seen in live action, but now they're animated in a different style as well. So it was really cool. And like I mentioned, what I enjoyed most is that it's not about the ring, it's not about hobbits, it's about characters from Rohan. You're just in this kind of a story following the main character Hera, who has to deal with different types of conflicts that end up coming up in her life. And so it was, again, really a fun time to be back in this universe. I will say, though, although the story is very interesting, there are a couple of kind of retreads, or it feels familiar, like you've seen this kind of a story beat before. That's kind of the unfortunate part after watching this movie. But again, I still enjoyed my time in the theaters. I loved watching all the animation, the style that they were able to build for The Lord of the Rings. So again, overall, had a fun time watching this movie. Let me give you a general synopsis about Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. Like I mentioned, the main protagonist in this film is called Hera. Hera is voiced by Gaia Wise, and it just goes through the story of Hera and how she has to deal with these different types of circumstances that come up. So Hera is actually the daughter of the current king of Rohan, Helm Hammerhand, and Helm Hammerhand is actually voiced by Brian Cox, and you end up seeing this interaction that plays out at the beginning of the movie where Helm is confronted by this Dunlading lord named Freka. He wants to marry his son Wolf to Helm's daughter, Hera, and after that offer, Helm is just kind of disgusted with it. He knows that Freka just wants the throne, and so he gets so infuriated with the request and previous request that we haven't seen, and he ends up basically challenging him to a fight outside of the throne room. And what ends up happening is that after they get into this fight, Helm actually ends up punching Freka so hard that he ends up killing him. And from there, you set up that Wolf, the son of Freka, just lost his father, and he basically vows revenge. And he goes on a path of just vengeance and revenge against Helm and his sons and even his daughter Hera. So that's basically the setup of the entire movie. And Hera must basically do all she can to protect not only her father, but her two older brothers as well, to just try to make sure that Wolf does not go through his plan of basically acting on his revenge because of losing his father. So that's really kind of the setup of the story. And obviously, again, I can go into more detail, but don't want to spoil too much for anybody that wants to check it out. Overall, I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed watching Hera, again, how she was going to try to go up against Wolf and how she was going to try to protect her family at all costs. And not only her family, but also the people of Rohan as well. So really enjoyed it. Thought it was a fun time in the theaters. I will say though, in regards to recommendations, if you're already a Lord of the Rings fan, definitely go check this out in theaters. I think it's again a fun time. The animation style is awesome to kind of see. Again, it's a cool take on what you're already used to. You're so used to watching live action Lord of the Rings, or even if you've watched The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime, you're used to that kind of a style. But here, what's so cool is again, it's animated. It's all kind of very well done in regards to the environment that they're setting up of Middle Earth. So again, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, definitely check it out. If you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, maybe skip this one in theaters. Definitely check it out in streaming if you're at all interested. And if you're a bigger fan of animation, then yeah, go ahead and check it out in streaming. You do not have to check this out in theaters. So that would kind of be my recommendation. Again, still a good movie, not perfect, but still has something for everybody if you're interested in a unique story or animation or music, whatever it might be. Still has something for all folks as well. All right, those are just my general overall thoughts about War of the Rohirrim. Let's go ahead and spoil some more details of the movie in the pros and cons section. I'll go ahead and start with my first pro of War of the Rohirrim, and it's actually going to be the character of Wolf. Now, it was weird because again, he wasn't like the character like, whoa, I was just so gravitated towards him. I just really enjoyed that he just kept digging himself into more and more holes in his arc. He is the character that is on a path of revenge. He lost his father. He blames Helm Hammerhand for killing his father. And so all he wants to do is to cause the same amount of pain for Helm and his family. He also feels like he's been betrayed by Hera because they were friends when they were younger, and he actually has feelings for her, but Hera has no feelings not only for Wolf but for any man. And so he now feels like he's trying to prove like you made a huge mistake, Hera, for not accepting me as your husband or not accepting me for marriage. And then he also wants to basically show that like because of these decisions, I'm going to have to hurt your family. And so he had multiple opportunities throughout the movie to either stop and not take it any further, or he even had the opportunity to become king of Rohan at one point, and instead he just kept digging himself into deeper holes. He kept refusing to do the right thing, and instead chose his pride, chose his ego, and says, "No, no, no. I haven't hurt the Hammerhand family. I haven't hurt them at all until I get through this entire kind of plan of killing the brothers, killing Helm, taking the throne. Then when I feel like my ego has been, met, then I can stop with all this revenge." So he kept making the wrong decision at every single turn, and you keep thinking like as an audience member, okay, he's truly not going to make that. Oh no, you know what? He made that decision again. He made the wrong decision. So again, really good stuff. I don't know why I really enjoyed seeing him kind of just dig himself into a hole that he could not escape. So really job well done by the character of Wolf. And again, that just goes out to the director and the writers of the movie for making this character at least compelling enough to be like, okay, is he really going to make that? Yep, he made that same wrong decision. So really cool stuff. That's my first pro. Second pro for me is I actually really enjoyed a part of the second act when it came to the animation of a winter storm, but also how they animated Helm Hammerhand. Because at one point, Helm Hammerhand is actually very much injured, after a specific battle, and he's just trying to recover. And then all of a sudden, you do not see Helm in his bed anymore. He's not resting. And then you start hearing from these barbarians that are trying to gain access to Helm's Deep. You hear them saying, "Hey, I'm seeing Ghost. I'm seeing Helm Hammerhand, the ghost of Helm, and he's a wraith now. He's not a man anymore, and he's taking out our troops one by one in the middle of the night." And so they're setting up this very cool idea of Helm now being a ghost. He's no longer a man. And the way they animated that, the way they animated during a winter storm, they just made it very intriguing and very engaging. As again, for me as an audience member, that whole visual of the winter storm and again showing glimpses of Helm seeming like he's not a man anymore, that was all so well done. And that was like really the best part of the animation for me. But also the way that they would visualize Helm Hammerhand, and you didn't know as an audience member, is he really dead? Is he now a wraith, or is he a ghost, or is it just a trick that's being played? So that whole part of like between the second act and the third act of Helm Hammerhand being a wraith and tormenting and torturing these barbarians in the winter storm at night was all very well done. And then the third pro for me that I have for War of the Rohirrim has got to be the music. This one's a no-brainer. They utilize aspects and themes of the Riders of Rohan theme in Lord of the Rings from Peter Jackson. I really enjoyed that they kept that kind of similar theme. It wasn't an exact copy. They obviously added more elements to it, but it was just such a well done job. And it added so much that the score was being able to be played as characters would be animated riding on horses, or you see eagles pass by the sky and you could hear the theme, or you go towards Helm's Deep and you hear again those musical elements of the original trilogy. And it just made me smile because I was like, oh man, I love this. And the music just hit really well. It was loud enough in the actual theater. So again, super easy pro, but they really got me as an audience member to enjoy this movie more because of how well the movie was curated with the music of Lord of the Rings. Okay, moving on to cons. Unfortunately, again, this movie is good, not great and perfect, and one of the reasons for that is the simple fact that the film has some familiarity and some retreads of story beats. Now, again, I did mention at the beginning of non-spoiler thoughts that it's cool to be back in the universe, but the unfortunate part is there's certain story elements and beats that feel like the Two Towers, and that's unfortunate when you feel like you've seen this before and it's from another movie in this same kind of universe. Like, for example, in The Lord of the Rings, you have the character of Eowyn. Eowyn is, a character that she doesn't want to be held back. She wants to be helpful in some way. She wants to be a warrior. She wants to ride out for her father. And Hera is very similar in this kind of a fashion. She's very a free-flowing character. She doesn't want to be held back in any way. She's one of the best riders for Rohan, and she's denied by her father. Her father wants to protect her at all cost. You also get certain elements that you've seen play out. For example, in the Two Towers, a lot of the people of Rohan have to go into Helm's Deep to be protected, and that same thing happens here. There's also a moment where in the Battle of Helm's Deep in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, you get Gandalf and some of the Riders of Rohan coming to save the day. And in this film, you get something similar. You get other banished individuals of Rohan coming to at least help the folks that are under siege at Helm's Deep. So again, that's the unfortunate part, is that there's elements that if they would have just stayed away from having it feel very familiar to the Two Towers, I think it would have been better off. But that's the unfortunate part for me, and why it's a con and a nitpick, is that as I was watching it, I was like, oh, okay, well, I've seen this before. I've felt this kind of a feeling before, and when I get that feeling of like, hey, well, I've seen this type of a scene, or this type of an emotional moment, I've already experienced that. It just doesn't hit as hard. So that's the unfortunate part. So again, that's my only con, but it is a big one. All right, circling back to some of the positives, let's talk about favorite performance of the movie. I gotta give a shout out to Brian Cox, who plays Helm Hammerhand. his voice is just so commanding. If you guys don't know, Brian Cox, very much known for being one of the main actors of the show Succession. And so he is the king of Rohan in this film of War of the Rohirrim. But again, his voice is just so strong. Everybody takes him so seriously. And again, he just plays off this voice that is just so, it takes over a room. And you could tell, yeah, this guy is meant to be the king of Rohan. Even for emotional moments when he's with his daughter Hera, he has to, kind of lower the tone of his voice, but it's still very powerful. So really well done to Brian Cox. He is my favorite performance in War of the Rohirrim. If I had to choose a favorite scene within the movie, I got to give a shout out to the final showdown between Hera and Wolf. So you have the main protagonist and the antagonist facing off. Wolf, like I mentioned before, all he wants is revenge. He wants to be the king of Rohan, and he's going to do whatever it takes in order to get that crown and that throne. And it's a cool showdown because you have Hera and Wolf facing off, and you could already tell again, Hera has the ability and the skills to outmatch Wolf. Wolf is just all aggression, all raw energy, and Hera actually has her wits. She has the brains to, kind of play with that situation with Wolf. And there's an awesome kind of showdown where it almost seems like Wolf has the upper hand, looks like he's about to stab and kill Hera, and then all of a sudden she's able to kind of get out of the way. She gets a shield and then basically chokes Wolf with the shield to death. And it was such a great ending to their arcs together, how they started off as friends, and now it all ends with them basically being enemies and Hera having no choice but to basically choke out and kill one of her childhood friends. So that whole showdown was a really cool moment. And then if I had to call out a favorite shot, something that was animated very well that could be a poster, there's actually a moment where this character Freylaf, he's actually wearing Helm's armor. Some of the barbarians that were trying to take out Hera and some of the people of Rohan, they still didn't know if it was Helm or if it wasn't. And then you just see, a beautiful shot of a huge moon, and then you have Freylaf wearing the Helm armor, and he looks like Helm Hammerhand on top of a mountain, and it just looks so majestic, so awesome. So that is probably my favorite shot. Basically, Freylaf wearing the Helm armor, pretending to be Helm Hammerhand, and he's standing right on top of a horse, and behind him is the big, huge moon just taking over the screen. So really well done shot, and something that I definitely would wanted to call out as my favorite shot of the movie. All right, everybody. Those are just my thoughts in regards to War of the Rohirrim, some of the pros and cons, and what I thought about it with a little bit more detail. All right, now let's go ahead and dive into whether I consider War of the Rohirrim timeless. As of this moment, I will say that Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim is not a timeless movie. And really the biggest reason for that is my con, which is the feeling that I've seen this before. I never like that feeling when I go into a movie and you watch something and you feel like, oh, okay, well, this other movie did it better, or I've seen this before, and this movie I'd rather watch that. And so that's the unfortunate part after watching Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, is it just feels too familiar. It feels too much like the Two Towers. And again, that's the only kind of bad part about it. I wish they could have just dived into other kind of concepts, just to, make itself very similar to Lord of the Rings, but also just take it a step further, or go a different direction. So that's probably the biggest reason why I would not consider it a timeless movie. One other thing I can call out is that the animation also wasn't anything spectacular, as compared to some of the other animated movies that I've seen so far this year. I mean, this isn't compared to The Wild Robot. To me, I still think The Wild Robot had some of the best animation of this year. So War of the Rohirrim already had a tall task to try to compete with that. Again, it's still good animation, just not the best of this year. But once again, those are my opinions, guys. That is what I thought about War of the Rohirrim. What did you guys think about Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was a timeless movie? And who was your favorite performance of this film? Let me know down below in the comments of YouTube, or leave a review down below for Spotify and Apple Podcasts so that we can interact about this movie. All right, guys, thank you so much for all those that listened all the way through to hear my thoughts about War of the Rohirrim. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 101 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new movie and we decide whether it is timeless. All right, guys, thanks so much and have a great rest of your week.